Welcome back, everyone. Today, I want to talk about a very interesting subject, confirmation bias in Fire Emblem. For us to really go into this subject though, we need to first look at the definition of what confirmation bias is. Confirmation bias is the tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms or supports one's prior belief or values. So why am I bringing this up? The reason why this is actually important is because confirmation bias occurs a lot when you're talking about units in Fire Emblem. And I really wanted to look at about 5 units that I think are applications of confirmation bias of people thinking they're better than they are. Not that they're bad, but that people just think they're way better than what they actually are, given the resource dump that goes into them, and then you getting a good result because you dumped the resource dump, not because they're actually just innately good. For starters, I want to look at Linoan from FE5. She's one of those characters that comes in and on paper seems to be absolutely fantastic, right? Like you have light magics, which means you can use Nosferatu, you have stave access, you have all these good things going on. But then you look at her promotion time, which is roughly chapter 21, and you start to realize like, wait a minute, by this point in my army, I already do have a ton of staff bots. And it's not bad to have staff bots, like it's always better to have more staff bots. But the thing is that Linoan just doesn't really have anything that's outstanding more than anybody else. Like her promotion gains are fantastic, but at the same time, people usually say you gotta give her like a Paragon scroll so that she can level up faster since she comes already with kind of low bases and lower level than everybody else in your army. But then they forget about Homer, who was right there and also already has Paragon and can also use Nosferatu upon promotion. So it's kind of weird for me for people to justify Linoan as this really top tier or really good character, while there's another unit that does combat way better. Granted, does not have access to staves like Linoan does, right? So that's a different category altogether, and for that alone, Linoan gets value. But I think that rating Linoan really high kind of underrates the amount of effort that you have to put into getting her to be a unit that can actually contribute at that level. Like you do a massive resource dump into Linoan in order for her to actually be better, while somebody like Homer just is better, at least for combat's sake. Even in staff bot, you have a ton of staff bots in the game by that point in time that can use most of the staves that you want already anyway. So it's not that she's redundant. Obviously, a character with 5 PCC being able to use Nosferatu will never be redundant, but I do think that she's valued a little bit higher than what she actually is due to confirmation bias in this case. The next character I want to talk about is Florina. Florina on paper has everything that you could imagine to be one of the best characters ever if you do Lin mode, right? You sit there and think, if I put all the resources from Lin mode into Florina, she will become a character that can actually carry. But then you start to realize that in Lin mode, there are also 2 other people that can carry, which are Kent and Sane, just as easily, on a better class, and also has access to like Javelin and hand axes, which are great in FE7. But the amount of resources you're dumping into Florina is actually taking away from other characters that could probably use it better. Like if you want a combat knight later on, like Fiora is certainly passable, and Florina is the best of the 3, hands down. So it just kind of feels weird to give Florina all this value, all these resources, say she's so good. And it's actually because of that confirmation bias of the idea of I gave her all of this and then she performed well. And not she performs well, ergo she deserves all of this, which is a different idea. You can kind of see that confirmation bias kind of creeping in slowly when after you give her all these and she starts to steamroll the characters in Lim mode, you're like, wow, this is a goddess. But is it really that she's a goddess, or is the enemy quality really bad in FE7 so she can get away with that? But there are other characters that do it better in that Lin mode right then and there as well. I also want to talk about Silas from Conquest. I think Silas is good. Don't get me wrong, I think he's a pretty solid character. But my beef with Silas is that he's a little bit inconsistent. He really lives or dies by if he levels a couple of points of speed here and there. And the thing is that he just doesn't quite measure up to the rest of the units that appear in Conquest. Like Conquest is really good at giving you units that can carry portions of the game in their joint chapters. Like Shura just comes in, can do a bunch of stuff for free. Gunther comes in, can do a bunch of stuff for free. Xander, Leo, they all come in, they can do a bunch of stuff for free. So like those characters, they just kind of have roles that they can just come in and do work in these chapters that you don't need to actually allocate resources to them. So then what happens is you can wind up dumping that experience into 1 or 2 or 3 more carries that you would prefer. And if one of those carries is Silas, then cool, like you can go for it. But the real reason I think Silas is a product of confirmation bias is because usually what people tend to do is they'll dump all these resources into Silas, right? So the main idea is you want to get him to Master Ninja with Soul. So they'll dump a second seal, they'll dump a promotion item, they'll give him an A support with Kaze, or they'll marry Korin. And by the way, all of this takes time. Like, right, you can't just get an A support with Kaze super fast. Like, you're going to get it in the later chapters or after Kaze joins. So it's not something that happens instantly. And it just takes a while to get going. But it does carry once it does get going. Like a Master Ninja with good offenses, and because of the way the speed works, it just bumps his speed up. It's actually pretty solid, and it does work. It works in many other ways. But I'll offer you an alternative. And this is a little bit of propaganda here, but Laszlo can do the same thing and actually better for less. And what do I mean by this? I mean that Laszlo just requires less resources to do this. Laszlo comes at a point in time that he could be insta promoted and you could get this value out of him. So yeah, he'll use the second seal, the master seal, the same thing as Silas. But he doesn't need a support in order to do that. He just has a lot of value in just being there and just having all of these experience already accumulated, which means you didn't have to dump experience into him to get this. And you really only need to do is get him to level 5 in Hero and then reclass him, because it's his innate reclass line. So it's kind of intuitive to do this, and easier, for me at least, to get the ball rolling on somebody like Laszlo than Silas, who requires like, oh, the XP to get to this level, and then I gotta reclass into this, and then I gotta reclass into that, and then I gotta get this A support. It just feels like there's a lot of resource dumping going on into Silas in order to justify him being good, when other units can do it for cheaper, at least. The next one I want to talk about is Nolan from FE10. This one is harder to see. And the reason why it's harder to see is because the Dawn Brigade is so bad that if you're a pretty good guy in the Dawn Brigade, you stand out like you're a titan amongst men. But the truth is, Nolan really isn't worth that investment. He really isn't. Like, he's solid, he's okay, he's got good value, he has a good support, Earth Affinity, and all that. He's probably one of the better members of the Dawn Brigade. But what if I told you that the Dawn Brigade itself is kind of useless and not worth investing any experience at all? What do I mean by this? A lot of the chapters of the Dawn Brigade actually have the solutions to the chapters themselves present within the chapter. Like, you'll either get the Black Knight, or you'll get Nyla, or you'll get someone that can actually help you carry through that portion. I'm not saying don't train the Dawn Brigade. Like, it makes it easier if you have a better Dawn Brigade to deal with certain portions of the game. What I'm saying is that the amount of resources to dump into Nolan to bring him up to par for part 3 or part 4 is actually not worth the investment at all. It's better to just dump it into somebody that already is good, like Zihark or Volug, who can just one round a bunch of stuff later on, even later in the game, or Soth, who's going to be there the entire portion of the game. It's just better to give those resources to somebody that doesn't need to be babied. Don't get me wrong, like, Nolan is the best of the bad guys. He's not a bad unit. It's just that there is a confirmation bias about, like, hey, I gave so much stuff to Nolan that he went and he performed really well during this portion of the game. When in reality, you probably could have given all that stuff to somebody else and they would have done better. Like somebody else, meaning Zihark or Jill or Volug or one of those 3 guys that joins later, because those guys are really good. But there is a confirmation bias going on with Nolan, in particular about how much value he has. The Reaver class is nice. It's a good class. Crossbows will always be useful. Don't get me wrong, that has inherent value. But it's just that the idea that he is way up here when he's really kind of mid is what I think the confirmation bias seeks in when you dump resources into him. Last but not least, I want to talk about one of the most controversial units in Fire Emblem. It's Anna from Fire Emblem Engage. I think I've made many videos about this. I even made a whole run about how Anna's gold is overrated and all that, but we're not talking about that today. Today I actually want to talk about how resource dumping into Anna does not make her better than what she actually is, when other units can use these resources better. So let me start off by saying that I think Anna's misunderstood by the community. People are like, just reclass her and she'll be the best unit in the game. She'll have these great growths, she'll demolish everything, yada yada yada. That's not true. Like, it's just not true. She can do that because any unit in Engage can do that. It's not because she's any better than any other unit that can do this. It's only because you're giving her the resources that can also go to other units that can do this one task. But let's take a look at Mage Knight Anna, because I think that's the main one that people go for. One of the comparisons I always see is people saying like, oh, well, she's better than the other options. Who are really the other options for a Mage Knight build, right? I would say it's something like Pandreo, Vale, which I'm going to get to later because people don't know this, Clan, and possibly Citrine if you want to go that route. The thing about Citrine is that her speed will not scale well into endgame, which means that you're either going to have to heavily invest or keep the Lin ring on her the entire time to get value out of this, which is fine. Like, if you want to go that route, it's good because it's a big magic stick, just destroys everything. But she does require that heavy investment resource in the form of the Lin ring, whereas Anna can probably get away without having to do that. Now, one thing I want you to know, let's take a look at like an early game Anna. So if you look at level 5 Mage Knight and you compare it to Citrine, I'm going to put the stats up here on the board. Like, you can see how these stats aren't that far off from each other. Like, yeah, Anna has more speed, but Citrine has more magic. And like, she has a slightly better defenses overall for Anna. But think about this number right here. Think about what's going on here and see that this is already a level 10-5 Mage Knight. What did we need to do to get Anna to this point, right? We needed to give her a Master Seal, a second seal, and we also needed to give her 5 levels and another 5 levels. So 10 levels total of experience given to her. For Citrine, we simply promoted her, and that was it. And we gave her 5 levels to Mage Knight. That's it. We didn't do anything else. We gave her a proficiency so she could get Mage Knight, which you would have to give to Anna anyway. But that's it. That's all you did. You just promoted her. You gave her 5 levels, and now she is doing this job for this portion in time. But let's look at a 10-10 Anna. Something like Mage Knight Anna versus Pandreo, who's come at more or less that portion of the game where people are around that level, right? Pandreo going into Mage Knight. I even did the wrong class here. I just went up High Priest and then I went into Mage Knight. So this just goes to show that Pandreo is just way better, which is fine because being worse than Pandreo is not a bad thing. Alright, it's like, who really can compare to him anyway? But if you look at Anna, the same applications that we did, plus another 5 levels, and you have a unit that loses in every single stat to Pandreo. Every single stat. Except strength. That's good to know that we have a character here that does way more work than the one we had to invest all these resources into, and the Micaiah ring and all that, all those shenanigans that we talked about. Cool. Alright. So you're thinking like, well, she scales super well into endgame, doesn't she? Like, her endgame potential is fantastic. Yeah, sure. Let's take a look. We'll grab a Mage Knight Anna 30, level 30 internal, which is reasonable. And let's take Veil, immediately reclassed at base. So you see what's going on here. Like, this is, I'm not making these numbers up. These are the actual numbers that you see. The Veil is just kind of like on the same level as this Anna that got all of these resources coming into her for free. But if that doesn't sell you on this, let me tell you something else. This Anna that you see here, 10/20/5, will not get to this level unless you severely feed her everything on almost every single map. Veil's strength doesn't come from the fact that she is a level 35 internal whatever. It's the fact that she already has these bases without having to get to level 35. Anna can't really reach that level by the time that she joins. She's not at that level because chapter 21 characters are usually around level 18 or 17, or if you really feed them, they could be looped with the second seal. But it's not as common to see that happen. So what's really going on here is I took the best case scenario Anna, where I dumped absolutely everything into her to almost match base Veil. I think people are dumping resources into Anna and are trying to justify this unit as like, oh, this is one of the best units of all time and yada yada yada. When you can see systematically here that at each point of the game, there is another character that can do that job better or equally for free. Now here's where I'm really gonna, you guys are gonna be like, what? How is this even possible? So people don't like clan. They say clan kind of sucks. Say clan is, it requires too much resources, whatever. Cool. Let's look at Mage Knight Clan at level 10 and Mage Knight Anna at level 10. As you can see, Anna has an advantage in magic, Clan has an advantage in speed, but for the most part, they are pretty much interchangeable. These two characters are not that much far apart that I'd be like, oh yeah, Anna is definitely infinitely better than Clan, or Clan is infinitely better than Anna, and this is already halfway through the game. So if a unit is halfway through the game, and we have argued that this unit is one of the best units in the game, yet statistically they compare it to one of the units that's considered C tier or even lower than that in the game, how does that compute? How does that value of information compute in which you can justify saying that Ana is so good, but Clan is so bad, when they're basically the same unit? They're very similar. There's very little difference between them. And I would argue that Clan is actually better because Clan is privy to that early game experience that nobody else has. He can actually use a bunch of magic against the generals early on. Ana can't do that. She has to sit there as an axe fighter for 5 levels, being able to get one-rounded by absolutely everything in the game, while you have to give her Micaiah. You can't give it to somebody else. You have to give it to her so that she can get these levels if you want to level up normally. But why can't you just do that for Clan? Or why can't you just do that for Citrine? Or why can't you just keep it on Yunaka and let her get that experience? Like, it just doesn't make sense to me that people think that she needs this resource, she deserves this resource because she's the best user of it, when I'm clearly showing you here that she's not the best user of it. Everybody here is comparable or equal to Ana at those levels for that job. So how much better is Ana really compared to the rest of the cast of Engage? Anyway, that's my video on confirmation bias in Fire Emblem, about how confirmation bias can help us see some units and think they're way better than what they actually are. I want to know from you guys, what do you think? Do you think that there are some units that there's so much confirmation bias going on for this unit, but they're not really that good, or there are other units that do this job better? I would love to hear those takes. I really appreciate it. Please hit the like and subscribe button. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.